My daughter found a note before I did. It was folded once and slid under the bread box, the way bills sometimes arrived when my parents wanted to avoid a conversation. She was 7, old enough to read carefully, young enough to believe handwriting carried intention. Her hands shook as she read it out loud to herself, lips barely moving. "We're off to Hawaii," it said. "Please move out by the time we're back." She looked up at me, the paper trembling. "Mom," she said, not asking anything, just naming me like a handle you grab when you don't want to fall. I didn't shout. I didn't even pick up the note right away. I knelt so we were eye level, took it from her, and folded it back the way it had been folded. Christmas Eve smelled like oranges and pine. The house felt borrowed in a way it always had, even after 3 years of living there, even after paying half the utilities, even after making sure the place ran when they traveled. "Go put your pajamas on," I said. "I'll be there in a minute." She nodded, watching my face for cracks. When she turned the corner, I took out my phone. There's a kind of calm that arrives when you stop asking to be considered. I'd lived long enough in their house to learn the rules were flexible only one way. Gratitude was expected, security was conditional. I'd been the adult child who moved back temporarily, then the single parent who stayed because rent was high and promises were soft. The note wasn't cruel so much as efficient. They assumed I would scramble. They assumed silence. I opened the tenant portal I'd created months ago and never used. When we moved in, my mother had waved away paperwork. We're family, but I had filed the forms anyway. The ones that established occupancy, the ones that asked for notice periods. I'd paid the filing fee without telling anyone. It felt unnecessary at the time, even faintly disloyal. Tonight it felt like a seatbelt you discover you're wearing right before the crash. I made one small change. I updated our mailing address to a place my parents didn't have a key to. I submitted a request for a compliance review regarding notice requirements, attaching a photo of the note. I didn't add commentary. The system didn't ask how I felt. Then I put the phone down and went to help my daughter brush her teeth. We ate dinner quietly. We watched a movie we'd seen before. I tucked her in and sat on the edge of her bed until her breathing evened out. She asked if Santa would still come. I told her yes. I believed it in the way you believe in systems when people fail you. The next morning, there was an email. Subject line, plain enough to be missed. Confirmation of review. It laid out facts the way facts like to be laid out. Dates, definitions, obligations. It confirmed that occupancy had been established. It confirmed that notice, to be valid, had to be written and delivered with a minimum period. It confirmed that access to the property could not be restricted during that period. It confirmed that retaliation was prohibited. No exclamation points, no sympathy. When my parents returned 2 days later, they were tanned and smiling until they saw the paper on the counter. Not the note they'd left that behind, but the printed confirmation, folded neatly, placed where the fruit bowl used to be. My mother's face went pale first, then careful. My father read it twice, slower the second time, like the words might rearrange themselves if given the chance. They didn't raise their voices. They didn't need to. The authority had already spoken. "We were just trying to give you a push," my mother said eventually. "We didn't think." "I know," I said. And I did. They hadn't thought. That was the problem. The house felt different then, not because anything had changed in the walls, but because the rules had stopped moving. Power didn't slam from one hand to another. It settled like dust after a door closes. We didn't have a family meeting. We didn't hug. We talked about logistics, about dates that were now clear, about keys that would remain where they were, about mail that would go somewhere else. My daughter sat at the table drawing, her pencil steady. That night, I lay awake thinking about how dignity can look like paperwork, how restraint can feel like distance. I wasn't triumphant. I was tired. There was grief in it. The small death of believing that proximity meant safety. There was relief, too, in knowing the boundary would hold without my having to guard it every minute. In the weeks that followed, the relationship thinned. Conversations became polite, then sparse. No one apologized. No one asked for forgiveness, We moved out on a date agreed upon by everyone and enforced by no one in the room. My daughter helped pack her books. She asked fewer questions. On the last morning, my mother stood in the doorway and watched us load the car. She looked at me like she was trying to remember when I'd stopped being someone she could instruct with a note. I waved. It wasn't cold. It wasn't warm. It was correct. That night, in our new place, my daughter slept without shaking. I sat on the floor with my phone in my hand, not making any changes at all, listening to the quiet that follows when a boundary finally does its job.